for somebody who's just starting out as an entrepreneur, I think the internet is a great place to start. Because if you're just starting out, unless you've got a ton of capital that somebody gave you or you inherited or something, you have to start a company that requires a small amount of capital, where it's heavily weighted towards the intellectual capital in your head. So I think anything to do with sort of software and with the internet is a really good starting point. It would have been impossible for me to have done electric cars or rockets, right from the start, because those require money to get anything done.
Could you talk a little bit more about your vision for the future in the next maybe 20 and 50 years, what you see the world looking like then?
Well, on the energy side, I think by the midpoint of the century, I think solar power will be the single largest source of electricity. It may not be a majority, but it will be the single largest source in the combination of photovoltaic and solar thermal. And I think in about 20 years, a majority of all new cars manufactured will be purely electric. And 20 years after that, the installed base will have flipped over to the point where the vast majority of the cars on the road are purely electric. Because the installed base of cars turns over about every 12 to 15 years. So I think that's a pretty positive thing that will occur. Which is going to require an enormous amount of work and investment and everything, but that's where I think things will end up.
I would like to know your point of view about education, the future of education.
Sure. My point of view on the future of education. Well, I can say what I think education should be more like, which is education should be more like an interactive game, and much less like what it is today, which is sort of a rather boring vaudeville act. It's sort of one person kind of droning on in front of a bunch of others with no special effects, and it's sort of like, if you think of the days of vaudeville, before there were movies or video games or anything, if you wanted to see a play, any given town would have a troupe of actors, but they wouldn't be that good. And now with movies, you take the best actors in the world, the best scriptwriters, best directors, special effects, you do multiple takes, and you make it really compelling. And that's why you want to sit down and watch a movie. That's how teaching should be. And then what teachers, it's still a role for teachers, but it should be to help people where they get stuck, as opposed to sort of, just lecture at them from the front of a classroom. If that's helpful.
Okay, well, terrific. So, one last question I'd like to ask you. We're talking about these different areas: education, energy, transportation. Do you think that it takes sort of, extraordinary resources, like the types of resources that you were able to accumulate to tackle these areas, or do you think that any entrepreneur can tackle, these areas?
Well, I think the barriers to entry, the higher the capital requirements, the higher the barriers to entry. I mean, the reason why we haven't seen significant improvements in space transportation is because the barriers to entry is extremely high. Mm-hmm. It's normally the province of governments, and big governments at that. So when there are high barriers to entry, then you don't see the new entrants, and you don't see the innovation. Because really the new entrants are what drive innovation. For entrepreneurs that don't have capital, they're really going to have a hard time starting a company in a high capital business.
Right.
It's possible, but in order to do that, you have to work at a company that does something comparable, so you have a convincing story to venture capitalists to give you quite a significant amount of money, rather than, instead of saying, say $3 million, you need, say, $30 or $40 million. It's a much higher hurdle.
Right.
So therefore, I think it's better to try doing something which requires low capital as kind of your first company. With the success of that, then take the capital from that and plow it into your second company. That's what I did, basically.
Right.